Hello, Cassidy here, coming to you live from the Netherlands to officially announce that here I am back for year four. Um, oh, hold on. There's an echo. Okay, I think that should be better. Yeah, back for year four. I will be honest, I was not sure if I would be back. Most of you who have followed me know that I had a lot happened to me in the last year or so, especially last couple years, and I'm in a very different place than I was 4 years ago. But after a lot of tossing and turning and waning, I've decided I'm gonna try and keep going with this little thing and see what happens. Um, so maybe I should back up a little bit and kind of start with why I've decided to come back and sort of why it was difficult for me to figure out if I would. Even up to this moment, I wasn't sure if I was going to start again or well, today. I'm sort of back and forth, but sort of leaning more to coming back. And a lot of that has to do with sort of where my life is and where my priorities have sort of led me to. Um, I won't get too much into it, but I've obviously, got married and have a family, and so life is different than when I was single and trying to figure out what I was doing with religion and ideas and, uh, filmmaking and all these things, and, I've just sort of realized that because I chose a different life to get married and to move a different country, uh, there are a lot of limits on me that I didn't have before. And it felt like I was stretched thin with a lot of the things I was doing as I was trying to like move forward. And I was scrolling through YouTube one day and I ran into this Chris Williamson clip uh, in a short. And basically, he was talking about if you're going to set your goals on things, you have to decide ahead of time what you're going to be bad at. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective to have because if you're going to go for something big like a work promotion or whatever sort of goal you have to realize that the other things that you want to put in your life might have to suffer and you might have to suck at those in order to be good at the thing that you're trying to pursue, at least for a time. And when I was sort of running in that equation and figuring out, well, what is it that I'm willing to suck at? Um, everything that that was calling to me that I wanted to put my best foot forward in and be committed to, all sort of was grounded in my lived reality and not my online worlds. And so there was really that question of like, well, if that's the case, do I let this part of myself go? Do I cut it off and just walk away from it and say I had a good run? Or do I find some middle ground and try to figure out what I do um, in the meantime as I'm sort of waiting in trying to ground myself in my lived reality? And what I realized is that as much as I want to get grounded and be really successful at the things that I have in my lived life, the stuff that I do online and having these conversations with all of these wonderful people that I've met through the online world give me a lot of life. And I don't think I'm quite ready to give that up yet. And not even that I wouldn't be willing to give it up. I don't know if I should. I just think there's a lot of things that are still here that are calling to me and that I'm wrestling with, and that I think could actually be very helpful for me to participate with as I'm grounding. But with that said, as I'm coming back to year four, I have to recognize that I might suck at this, which really bothers me because um, I mean, I got my degree in filmmaking. Um, I should know how to do all of these things well. And, you know, intellectually I do, and even in practice I do. But I'm willing to suck a little bit in order to just still have joy with this and put the priorities on the things that are what I should have my priorities on. But in some ways, that kind of alleviates some of the pressure and kind of brings a fun into it. And it gives me a place to kind of explore and try different things. And so that's what I'm going to do this year. There are still things that are going to stay the same. I'm still going to be doing the Information Addicts podcast and long form content, but I definitely want to try to introduce different things, try talking a lot more about creation and the way that we participate in that, which I think is particularly helpful because that sort of seems like a conversation that's been coming up in this little corner in estuary spaces a lot, and probably something that if I have any authority on anything, creation might be the thing that I could potentially help with. And I want to do more live chats as well. So every Monday, 7:30 my time, which I think is CEST, but Amsterdam time, I'll be doing these little live chats, sort of Luke Thompson style. I might bring a little topic to start and then open it up. But that's sort of what I'd like to do. And yeah, eventually it'll probably be sort of a mix between, you know, what Luke Thompson does where he talks and then he opens it up, and then sort of the, excuse me, so sort of the open studio where I might be working on things or projects and just letting people come in and out whenever they want. So with that, I'm happy to have anybody come in and join the conversation if you'd like. It's always helpful to have a conversation partner. I actually prefer um, talking with people than just doing some lecture or monologue or something. So the link is in the bio below, and then I'll put it in YouTube as well, live chat comments, so that you can come in and have a conversation. We might not have many people able to come right now. I announced this pretty last minute, sort of my last ditch effort to potentially escape my destiny of coming back to YouTube, but yeah, clearly I failed. So hold on. Oh, where is it? I exited out the screen because it was making noise. Okay. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. That will just to the chat. All right, there is the StreamYard link if you'd like to join. If you're going to join, I do ask that you have your camera on and your name, or unless I know you, then there's some flexibility, but it just makes it easier to have your camera on. So, Peter, I'm happy to give you 1 to 2 minutes. Absolutely no problem. Just make sure you are able to have your camera on and have a conversation. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, so again, every Monday, the first Monday of the month, I'm going to try to do these live streams on this channel. And I don't know, I want to keep them open and see how they'll develop, but I would like to make something at least a little bit consistent so that one, I have at least something coming out every month. I can't make commitments on what it's going to look like going forward exactly, but I have some plans. I'll probably fail them, but that's okay. That's sort of the fun of it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, we've got our first friend joining. Hi, Chad. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm so good. So nice to chat with you. I feel like we've missed each other on some of the live chats lately.
Yeah, it's a lot of it has to do with just this time slot. Is sometimes if like the job is has good reception, I can do it like on the job site, or
Right.
if I'm working by myself, it's pretty easy to do. Otherwise, it kind of weirds people out, and I'm talking to myself and all that stuff. And but right now, I had a little bit of smoke break and eating the apple fritter, which are so good.
Yeah, it
Apple
sounds
fritters
delicious.
from Quick Trip are the bomb.
Oh, I loved the taquitos at Quick Trip. I used to eat
Mmm.
those all the time when I was in college. Because I basically lived in my car going from like
Mm.
work to school and back and forth. And so you'd always just stop at Quick Trip, eat a taquito.
Yeah. So were
My
you
guilty pleasure.
in the Midwest then when that
No,
that time?
no, just the Southwest.
Oh,
Yeah, we have them in
they have
Arizona.
Quick Trip. No kidding.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're the best gas stations in Arizona. They're, like, clean and, yeah, they always
Yep.
have those, like, safety signs, so there's always bright lights and yeah,
Yeah.
they're great gas stations.
Yeah. Same here. Same. I mean, it's basically the only place I really go unless I, have no other option.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
Oh, great.
So could you could you summarize for me what your time has been like on the online space and like how do you feel about your contributions and is it like what's it been like for you?
Wow, that's a very great question. It's an overwhelming question to think about for me personally because, um, I've gotten so much good from being in this space. I've also seen a lot of darkness, but, like, my life has completely changed because
Mhm.
I was willing to go online and show myself to strangers on the internet.
Mhm.
I met my husband through the Discord, and so that basically, I was not I was not planning to meet anyone online. In fact, I had sworn that off. But, it just happened, and so now I'm living in a different country. I have a like a baby. I have I'm learning a new language. Like, there's all of these things that changed, and it's like overwhelming to think about all the good that came from that. Um,
Mhm.
Yet there's this other side that's also sees what chronically online activity can do to people, even myself,
Mhm.
and that's really hard. um, but also recognizing there's probably not a way you can fully go back unless the whole internet shuts down for some reason. Um, there's always going to sort of be this in between world. And
Mhm.
I think for me, um, I hope that I can find ways to cultivate more of the good, minimize more of the bad, and find a happy middle. But that might be me being idealistic.
Um well, sorry, I don't want to take up too much time. I'm sure Peter has something he wants to get at.
No,
I
it's
just
quite the opposite. I found your question very good and I found it very interesting because I had something similar on my mind. Not today, but the last few situations when I was watching Cassidy's channel and I was thinking, okay, how is it for her? She met her husband here within the little corner of his internet. I think you even coined the term. And
I no, I coined the term randos.
oh, okay,
which I
Yes,
have
okay.
stolen by
Very
the way.
sorry. It's
that's okay.
very
I'm
strange one.
happy to have it stolen. I was not trying to coin anything. It was just the funny way
That's
my
very
brain works.
that's very much the spirit though, isn't it? It's kind of like, oh, you found something cool and then you kind of like we have these kind of fun trading cards called words
Mhm.
and it helps us to see things better and um I think that's been really fun. And actually the whole randos model
Mm.
has really been one of the bright spots in my time doing YouTube stuff. And actually YouTube is really strange. Do you guys remember um, exploring YouTube in the very, very beginning of your YouTube experience? Can
Yeah.
you tell me what that was like? I have something in mind, an answer in mind already, but I just want to say because like I've been trying to think of, I've been trying to understand the point of view that that my loved one had, that my partner has, my wife has, and I've been talking a little bit with some of the other friends who have spouses who
Mm.
and these guys are in this on this
Mm.
online forum and they're doing this. And I was thinking the other day about this, how different, like how completely different YouTube is today for me than it was when I first started. Like I didn't do any comments. It was a completely global, impersonal experience. And now it's like we've kind of flipped the medium on its head and used it to our advantage. And so it's really hard, I think, to explain that to somebody.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've been on YouTube since the beginning. So, when I was in high school was when YouTube first came up, and the first sort of real viral things were just random home videos or like crazy little, um, like little videos that people would put up. But the first really successful content creators, if you will, were bloggers in their bedrooms telling their personal
Mm.
stories.
I
And
already
that's what drew me in. And so it's funny to see how the randos movement has flipped things on its head, but in a lot of ways it's returning to its origins, which is really interesting to me.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I think I misapplied or misused the YouTube platform from the very beginning. What you stated in the sense of it being something very global, something impersonal, I didn't care for it. I was very much acquainted with, you spoke the word forum, and I very much like that term because in Germany it is similar. We call it certain internet pages forums, and I got acquainted with the internet via that kind of platform. That means I was interested, for example, in trading cards. So it's not language, but it was trading cards. And so I was going on, met strangers, got acquainted with them. And because it is a very small group of people who are interested, but they are isolated and they have their own history. And I find that very interesting that such a thing like an internet site or page can have its own history with its own references, with its own jargon, with its own language. And they say, oh, that one was very interesting, and that was a period, and that was distinct, and everything changed. And then you look at the other instances of the internet and you say, oh my goodness, when I go into Google search and enter some kind of word or reference, I found thousands, millions of pages, and I am on one of those, and we all might have our own history, our own side. And I think that's really interesting. And so I came from this situation, got acquainted, became a moderator, that is something like an administrator on that page. And so I rose to the small top that small page like this one allows. And so I found it quite interesting because you always had the situation that you were allowed to change everything, and most of the rules were undefined and unrefined. And the question was, how honest were you? How straightforward were you? And the rules, what kind of rules? I think the question is really who is aware of what should be the case. And within YouTube, it is more or less chaotic. And I came from this kind of forum, from this kind of platform that is more personal, more acquainted. And as they say, power corrupts, and whether you become corrupted by power or not, even on such a small space, says something about you and your character. And I don't think I got corrupted. At least people told me I wasn't. Quite the contrary, I got lauded a lot. But I came from a personal space, and so YouTube was always for me another kind of forum, not something international or anonymous.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because there is depending on when you got into the space and where you spend time on the space, you have such a different sense of what works on YouTube, what's good about YouTube, all of these things. And these questions of what works, what's valuable, all of those things, I think they're so wrongheaded in a lot of the ways people look at them and the way that we're functioning with them. Because in a lot of ways, YouTube is the ultimate like video experimental platform. Like that's, it's people have found a way to make it a job. And so there have been rules that develop and have formed things. And there are patterns that we're starting to see a lot more. But that all came from this experimental space. And YouTube is really only about 20 years old at this point.
Only with reference to something very new as a phenomena that hasn't been there within. I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. And it is
Well,
like a whirlpool, isn't it? It draws in your attention and time and space and activity. No?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because media is so around us. It's so normal for us, but it's only been around for 100 and something years. Like
Yeah,
that, it's very young art form. Yeah.
It's
this
not that.
makes me think of like what comes to mind here is the idea around um, the genesis of something being closely akin to what might be its end or its telos, and so it seems like this is something like like a autobiographical or biographical medium,
Mm,
but it's turned into a like a biographical dialogue, which is
mhm.
interesting. And so like when I think of when like say the internet space that shall not be named, this little corner, like this, it's like when I think about it, when I think about what's in its DNA, to me it didn't seem like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with like anybody um, setting out to make a living and stuff on that. I think that if you can do that, that's great. I just think like the hopes of that happening are kind of, for me anyways, like I would never approach this thinking I'm gonna make a living on this. Like this, that's not the joy of it. The joy is like being able to hear somebody's story or share ideas and like the trading card of language. But like the what seems to be in the DNA of the this online space that we are all sharing is that sort of thing. So like when we try to box it and then package it and then like do whatever that whole thing is, like your classic, your classic like news medium, it just doesn't work.
Hmm.
And
Mm,
because like I think, well, there's way too much suspicion built into each of us to let that kind of go down. And then so there's a lot of disagreeableness there though, but it is still like this desire to like, I think, I really think that, because like what you were talking about, I just can't give it up, like I really think the only way I could honestly really give it up is if Anne was like, listen, it's either me or YouTube.
Right.
And then I would probably have to like see a therapist or something to actually give it up. I'm just trying to be as honest as I possibly can there because I don't know, right? Like
mm,
I gotten upset a few times and just tried to hate quit, and it never worked. Like I'd be lurking for like a week listening to stuff, and then
Hmm.
somebody would say something, I'd be like, oh, I want to chime in,
Is it
and
something like a withdrawal symptom or something else like that? Would you say
um,
that it is akin or different from something like an addiction?
well, I think it's tied to the kind of feeling that I've had most of my life, which is the feeling that I never quite fit in. And so then when I'm sitting on
Mm,
the outside watching, when I
mm,
know I
mm,
belong here, it
mm.
like it's like uh
Yeah,
I belong there. I belong
ah,
with these people.
yeah.
And so I can sit and justify it all different sorts of ways. I have
Mm,
to personally I just Ann and I just did an interview. It's on the channel if anybody wants to go listen to it. It's really great. We kind of talked about some of this. There's an intentionality that has to go into um,
mm,
online versus at home life, and so
mm,
obviously this is really easy place to be intentional and aim
mm,
your attention at. And so like in order to have a healthy home life with this, I have to actually really aim my intentions and attention on the ground at home, which is it's just hard for me to do that. And
mm,
so that's just for anybody out there who wants to do this sort of thing. You'll probably run into some of this, especially if you have a partner or a spouse.
mm,
This
mm.
conversation will come up if you care about your marriage. Um, right. So,
You
but
just
I really
mentioned it.
appreciate
Oh,
you, Cassidy. I got to get actually back to work. Speaking
oh
of
yeah.
home
No
life,
worries,
but
Chad.
I'd
Thanks for
love to have
dropping
you
in.
on. I'd love to have you on as a randos at some point if you'd like to come tell your story. So,
Oh, sure. Let's reach out to me Discord. I'm spotty on Discord nowadays, but reach out. I'll look
Sure.
for a message and we'll figure something out.
It'd probably be in April. I'm like booked that far out right now. It's ridiculous.
Okay. Okay. I know I have a trip at the end of April, but I can probably figure something out if it's early April. So we'll figure it out.
All right. Thank you. Have fun.
Yeah.
I'll be listening. Bye.
Thanks, Brad. Bye.
Well, if I may conclude or add something to what he already said, I found it so funny that he mentioned that little corner which shall not be named, and we all have read Harry Potter and have all been part of this generation which was involved in it. I think I don't know what it was like in the Netherlands, what it is in the USA, but I think it is a Chamber of Secrets, but we translated it into German. I am a German fellow, as the Chamber of Dread, Kammer des Schreckens. And so
Distractions? The Chamber of Distractions?
No, this of dread.
Of dread. Oh, okay.
Dread, which is something very alien, which is something you shouldn't be part of. You shouldn't look at it. And I think it is more similar to what Voldemort, who shall not be named, but whose name I, of course, have mentioned already, is certainly an object of. We dread him and we shouldn't mention him because if we mention it, something might happen.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know it was that. Yeah, the translations are so interesting to me, especially learning a different language. I'm learning Dutch right now, and so you get a whole different perspective of translations and the way language works. That's sort of funny.
What I really find interesting is, for example, you have a certain parallelism. Okay, that is okay, a little bit better. You have a certain parallelism between, say, one language and the other. And you have some words where you can draw lines and you can draw perspectives, and you say those concepts are more or less aligned, and the words are not necessarily aligned. And so you have sometimes the situation that you can draw a line and it's directly corresponding to each other, and sometimes it's not. And so I think one of the main benefits of learning another language is to learn new connections and have to have new associations which were unknown and uncommon before to you.
Yeah.
Has there been any kind of change within your life or everyday situation where you say, okay, Dutch was very beneficial for me?
Oh, I mean, besides just being able to communicate with my neighbors and the people around me, I haven't gotten to the deeper level yet. I'm still struggling with trying to get some sort of command of the language, especially because there's a lot of Dutch people who speak English. So you try speaking Dutch to them and they'll speak English back. And then, you're not good enough to sort of keep up the facade of like, no, I can do this.
Yes.
But I mean, it's just been sort of interesting to look at the parallels, and Dutch is very similar to English. But in a lot of ways, there's things that are simpler with it.
Yeah.
And then the word order is very interesting. So there's interesting parallels. The Dutch phrases are so odd to me, especially when they translate them directly into English. I still haven't gotten my mind around all of the phrases. My husband got me a Dutch daily calendar with all the different phrases, but translated literally into English. And I'm just like, this is a made up language. This is not real.
Those connections are so uncanny. You cannot relate those. And
I'm still working to get that really deep connection to it. It's too new, I think, but I'm trying my best to kind of get grounded in it.
My grandmother on my father's side was German, but my grandfather on my father's side, obviously, who was her husband, was a Danish man, and they encountered each other and they get to know each other due to the Second World War. And she was in the position that she had to learn the Danish language, but she didn't. And so all his acquaintances really learned German for her. And so it was quite funny to have someone who was part of the Second World War on the Danish side, and they all spoke German, but she didn't speak any Danish. But she was very interesting and very clever woman, but language wasn't really her suit.
Specialty, yeah.
No.
Luckily, language does come fairly easy to me. Like all of the, a lot of times when I speak Dutch, people are like, "Oh, your Dutch is very good," especially when they hear how long I've been there. But part of me thinks you've just never heard an English speaker try to speak Dutch because it's so easy to just speak English. It's like, "Oh, you're very good." I'm like, I don't think so. I think it's just like I'm the only English person or English speaking person who ever tried to speak Dutch that you know. But I want to be able to really learn it because I think there is so much to like the native tongue and the way that you can interact. Even though there's so many people that speak English and speak very good English, I always feel this sort of language barrier between a lot of people where it's sort of like, even if we both can pretty much understand, you're always sort of struggling of what do they understand, what don't they understand. And it's just so different than speaking to someone in your regular, like in your mother tongue.
Yep.
And so I don't know if I'll ever be that good Dutch to fool someone into thinking I'm a natural born Dutch speaker, but at least if I give it a shot, I'll have a better chance of connecting in some way, I think.
I agree. I think there's something very similar to that. Maybe you know it. You spoke of a language barrier, but what is the way in which it manifests? I would say it manifests like this. You have always a kind of abstract anticipation of what you would like to say next. But the question is really how the representation, the abstract representation, is attached to the words. And then you have sometimes a concept that you would like to translate, and then you fondle around and try to find circumventions so that you do not have to use any other words than the ones which you already know. Right. And so you're grasping after something in thin air, and sometimes you grab it and then you say, "Oh, I'm happy, I have found something, I can use this." And other times it really is this situation where you get lost and where you have no way to really communicate or communicate it in the appropriate way. And then you have also this awareness of, oh, what I wanted to say has in my own language this other meaning, but I cannot translate it. But in this language, it has no correspondence. Say, for example, if I had this talk with Aaron from the German, from the little corner, you know him. Yeah. And he spoke with me about Schopenhauer and the word is will and representation. And the word is will and representation is a bad translation. Representation means Vorstellung in German. And he says, "Oh, there's Vorstellen in the Netherlandish language, but there is no correspondence to that in the English language." And he says, "It's similar like when you go to the theater and you have someone on the platform like that, an actor who presents something. Es stellt sich dir vor," we say in German. And there's nothing like this in the English language. And sometimes you have this lack of something, of a meaning. You would like to say it, but there's nothing that really fits.
Yeah. No, you explained it really well in something that I felt tangibly, but I had never been able to really put into words. But there is this anticipation of not only you trying to express words that are going to translate, but then this anticipation of wondering if the words that are coming out of your mouth are really being translated in the way that you mean. And I think I'm in this sort of limbo land where I'm not proficient enough in Dutch to feel that confidence in speaking that language either. And so you're always sort of in that world where you're never quite sure if what you're saying is coming across the way you mean it.
It somehow reminds me of this, I think, advertisement with Chuck Norris with a legendary split on two airplanes instead of some kinds of buses. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh no. Okay, so the reference is lost on you. But there was an online advertisement battle, and they had something like, "Our motors are the best in the world. Our technique is the best in the world." And so one company really put out this advertisement with someone, I think it was Claude Van Damme, and he made a split, and he was able, seemingly it was computer generated, obviously, but he was able to have a split and to have one leg and the other leg on both cars at the same time, and so they were driving. And then next idea was, okay, Chuck Norris. Of course, there are Chuck Norris jokes, and he is someone who is really able to battle against each and everyone, and he will always succumb them. And so he was on 2 airplanes within the air, and the situation for someone who is able to speak Dutch without being recognized as someone who is from the English country, from Germany, or somewhere else, from another nation. I think it's similar to that. Like this legendary split on 2 airplanes.
I'll have to look that up, get it more ingrained in my mind.
It really is a funny idea, but I think some things are just a meme, and that is really interesting that something like a meme is possible. I mean, in the sense of people do not use words, language, they just have a picture. They have a picture and a reference to a situation, which is very general, which is very abstract in a sense, but they immediately recognize it and they say, oh, that's funny, or they immediately laugh and recognize it as something ridiculous. So there is something that can be communicated without it being part of language. And communication is not always language.
Right. Well, most of our communication is actually nonverbal. Like whether it's body language, tone of voice, like facial expressions, they're all of these things that we're communicating with each other that don't have anything to do with language. And it's really interesting to see how those things manifest, especially with children. My nephew came over to America for our wedding, and I have a bunch of nieces and nephews who are American, and he's Dutch, so he doesn't really speak English, and he was 5 or 6 at the time, and to see him play with my 3-year-old niece, and they get along and are the best of friends without actually having the same language, like verbal language, is so interesting to me. And the recognition of there's so much more to the way that we interact with people and the way we connect than the actual words that we're saying. And kids are so good at looking past that. I think as adults, we get a little self-conscious about all of those things in a way that kind of prevents us from connecting in ways that could be beneficial.
I don't know. I have multiple associations, but one thing is I was quite recently visiting my mother, and so we visited all kind of stages, all kind of locations from our mutual past. And so I was visiting a kindergarten of mine, and we were there and we looked at it and we were talking about past acquaintances of mine, small children. And she was telling me one story of someone who said, who she mentioned, oh, he moved places and he went there and there. And I mentioned to her, oh, yes, we played with each other, but I didn't really like him. And then she said, what? Why did you never mention that? Why did you never mention that you didn't like him? Well, I had to hide it away. And I was of the opinion that he couldn't be really trusted. And if I were ever to mention it, that might be a problem, both with him and both with the adults. And so I was able to, as you said, play with him, to interact with him, but without ever talking about what the problems were. I think in some sense, we still underestimate the consciousness of children. And in some senses, we under-attribute the meanings that they have for their own surroundings. I think while growing up, we learn a great many things and we naturalize our conduct, our understanding of a world, and they still attach a lot of meaning. They are very conscious, but the meaning and the detachment between the younger and older people is very strong. And a lot of things are totally alien to them. I myself remember that I found a great many concepts very alien to me. You are a Christian, I think, and I remember you being part or getting to be a part of the Orthodox tradition. But I think the concept of love was very alien to me. For example, during my adolescent phase or my puberty, I had, of course, a lot of passion, like many men had, but I found this idea of love and its connection to care very strange. And it led to very strange ways of using language. So the people use language in a fashion which I found to be contrary to my own understanding of a phenomenon. And with time, I grew more or less accustomed to the use of language, and I learned to connect things which hitherto haven't been connected with each other. And I think something like that happens when you grow up. You get to learn that you have to disregard your own objections, that you have to ignore some contradictions, and that you have to connect phenomena which up until now were very much distinct. Love might be something that you have for someone who you look at and say, that girl or man is beautiful and I really want to be with him or her. And that is very much distinct from the Christian kind of love. And that you learn that the same words are not necessarily meaning the same thing within your mind. I think those abstract representations are very much distinct, like in the situation when you speak English and you have no difficulty of talking, but when you try to translate your abstract anticipations into Dutch, that becomes very difficult. And I think something like that happens. They are very much distinct, the representations of the word and the words that you use.
Right. So for you, this sort of disconnection with the word love, can you go into deeper what that was like? Where were you seeing this disconnect in the way that you understood it and the way it played out or was told to play out in the world?
Would you like to go me more into the details of some examples, or would you like to tell me about what I assume are the origins of that?
Whichever you'd prefer.
You can already watch it on Paul Vanderklay's channel that I had a random conversation with him. It was very much about the topic of divorce and how detachment plays a role. And I think changing places, going from your mother's place to your father's place, of course, led to a very strong detachment of my own surroundings and to the awareness that when you go to one space and then you enter another realm and then you go back, you are judged by very different measures.
Right.
When you have, for example, the situation that your mother tells you, what has your father done to you? You're very much changed. And the very same happens when you come from your mother and your father tells you, you're very strange and you're very different from usually. So I think that is the origin of it all for my consciousness. And this kind of split is something that not everyone has, but I think which becomes more and more common and will become more and more common due to the what we call the marriage crisis, the difficulties of people and parents staying together,
right?
The institution of the family, dissolving it, and that really leads to the more split consciousness. I think so. What I'm trying to tell you is, it will happen more and more frequently, and we will have those kinds of encounters more often within the future. But the kinds of splits. Maybe you want to interrupt me. Maybe you have questions.
No, keep going. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And yeah, I can see what you're saying. I'm grateful that I did not have that personally, where I had to be at different homes. But I saw it with friends growing up, and I think you're seeing so many people sort of lose the idea of what marriage is and what value it really holds with this deterioration that's just kind of increased. It's I really resonate with what you were saying there.
I think that's a really relevant discussion, and I very much appreciate that you have spoken with other people about, for example, the Barbie movie. And I think it's really important that we have another female perspective on this, and the videos that you had with Burn Powers and also on Taylor Swift. I think that is really very much related here. But going back to the kinds of detachment, I think what we will have is, or what we should be more and more aware of, is the symbolic and the linguistic systems are not identical with the local attachments within a person, an individual that is an organism. I think what we have is a very different kind of system and substructure. When we have something, for example, like a narrative, people say you cannot think without a narrative, you cannot act without a narrative. I think this is based on a certain kind of confusion. It is based on the assumption that both of them are the same. The psychological processes and the anticipations, also them being conjoined with the use of language, with the symbolic structure within our surroundings. I think that is wrong. I think that is completely wrong. It is very true that narratives help us and guide us, and they also have some very different functions which can be a given. You have the, I would say, motivating, the guiding function, and they are also helping you, and that is very distinct, in building communities. When we speak from the Christian perspective, and then someone mentions to you, oh, this is something similar to like the story of David or the story of Saul, the King Saul, and then they get some associations and they are led to the assumption that you are part of some kind of story, kind of narrative, and they form a bond. This bond is the result of people mutually conjoining those things. And I think they can be and are sometimes very different. And that means that many people take it for granted and they are, in a sense, switching the assumptions. In German, we have the word Täuschung, which is something like deception. And some German fellow that I very much appreciate has said, Täuschen kommt von Tausch. Deception comes from exchange, it would be in German. And they are exchanging the meanings and they do not notice that this happens to them. And due to the plausibility, due to us perceiving the world in very similar fashions, we do not notice this problem of translation. And that is also the problem of translation, not only with Dutch, English, German, but also in communication. We are oftentimes possessed, I would say, by ideas and concepts without even noticing that this helps us in connecting and building a community, although there is no community in that sense. So growing up like a child from divorced parents has very much made me aware that people take many things for granted, because a child of that origin is very much inhibited and is unable to participate in what other people do without any effort. You always hold back, you always hover.
Yeah. So what do you think people are taking for granted the most right now?
In general, or at this situation, in our geopolitical or history situation, or what?
Let's go back to sort of the sort of man versus woman, the marriage crisis situation. And maybe you can speak from the male perspective. It might be harder to get right in the shoes of women, but what do you think we're taking for granted there?
I think the question is easier to answer when we say what we have lost, what we take for granted, and that become aware of only as soon as things change, and only in retrospect we realize what really has been taken for granted. But that is, for example, the shared language, the shared assumptions, the mutual goals, the similarities in striving. For example, that a family should be something shared, that we should be trying to work in a similar direction, at common goals. But what you can see is, for example, that I remember the story of Abraham sacrificing his son and getting him back. I think this really goes back to an observation that is very much related to what we are talking about. I think a man who was working for some purpose, and in that sense being very much distracted, in the sense of not building up a family, not bringing his attention to other women, but doing something and being good at it, and thereby getting later on the attention of the women, of the females, and then getting his son back by some kind of miracle. That is, oh, someone is a good carpenter, and he has never met a female before. He was never a part of a great community, but the females go and look at him because he's good in what he does, and he's good, and thereby draws their attention, and thereby the son that he has sacrificed in his earlier days, he might get back while being old. Abraham being, as Peterson always says, being 80, 90 years old, I don't know how old he is, but he gets his son back by the attention of the females who later come back when he has already sacrificed his attention to the female gender because he has done something else. And this is getting lost. This is getting lost because of pornography, of virtual spaces in which you can do things that require work but will not draw any physical attention, because the things which draw attention from the other gender, from your own successes, are mostly those which are material, and thereby by hoarding, for example.
Oh,
okay, that was.
you're back.
Okay.
You dropped out for a second.
Okay. I think you got most of it. I think it was by drawing and enriching yourself with digital wealth, you do not draw the female attention except when you are, for example, a pro gamer or something like this. But I find it very strange, and I do not believe in really that this is a good concept to be successful with the females. And so I think what really happens is that we are losing this kind of tradition, that you can work for something and that your efforts, in whatever way you invest, will draw their attention. By this distinction of material, physical space and digital space, we lose that kind of experience. And this will no longer work that same way. And you will have people like, what do we call them? I don't know. I'm not part of them, so I don't know.
You're talking about the incels?
Exactly, the incels. The incels are a result of this, and a very clear phenomenon of it. The dissatisfaction of it is because they put their attention to the wrong things, and not because it is not bringing them money or not bringing them joy. In some other ways it doesn't, but it doesn't draw the attention of the women that they would like to attract. And this kind of attraction and the connection between the efforts of the male and the woman is really revolutionized at the moment. So you are a very unusual case by getting to know your future and now husband and father of your own child via the internet. I don't think that this is very usual, and it won't be within the future.
No, well, it's becoming more normal, but not the way that it happened with us. Like, there's a lot of dating apps and those sorts of things, and like I know lots of people who have met and married through online dating in a sense, but not the way that me and Ferdi got together. No, that it is quite unusual in a whole host of ways. But I guess I've never been quite usual.
Good for you. Good for you.
Well, some might argue that it's caused me a lot of pain too, but you get beauty from it.
I think it mostly does. Being unusual is painful, and you have to sacrifice a lot of things that other people take for granted. Again, back to the topic.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I do think that there is a lot of how we live our lives now that isn't thinking about the whole picture. Like we can't see the forest through the trees, and there's this this sort of reliance and celebration of the freedom that comes from Western culture without fully calculating in the responsibility of what that means. And yeah, that's difficult. I mean, I know for myself there are ways that I've fallen into that pattern. Like I can't deny that I haven't, and there's probably still ways I'm falling into that pattern that I don't even recognize. But there is something sort of sobering about the recognition that we are taking so many things for granted that that it does kind of help you stop and think. And yeah, there's certainly sadness when it comes to the marriage crisis, especially I think for women, because I think a lot of women, by the time they figure out what they took for granted, it might be too late to have the chance to have that in their life. Now, that doesn't mean they can't have a beautiful, fulfilling life, but there's still a sadness to this thing that was beautiful and they saw it too late.
I think the concept of regret is very important to a free society, because when you become aware of what you would have otherwise done, when you had already perceived, already recognized what you hitherto haven't known, that means that you have to change your perspective, or had to change it, and you have to give it to the next generation and tell them without being bitter about it. You have to communicate that there are things within your own life which you would have done different if you had already known it. And for that reason, I think we learn by examples, we learn by people manifesting and being different in their outcomes by attaching importance to different things. And this is also something that will change by people staying at home, by being not part of the open society, and being, in the sense of it being a public arena where you recognize and can perceive what is good by looking at it. And most of the things you do not realize because it takes place in confined spaces within your own flat, within your own house, and you get back and no one looks at you, no one recognizes what happens to you. You could die, in a sense, silently without anyone being aware of it. We have, of course, nowadays stories of people getting the record for being one of the oldest people in the world, and then they try to give an award to that, for example, Japanese women, and then in the flat they realize the woman has been dead for 15 years. And so those are real stories, of course. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
But I think this is something that happens to us. And what we might look at and what we might see are, in that sense, wrong symbols misleading us in the sense of putting attention to the wrong things. The digital advertisements, the propaganda, I would even say, but also the people we meet in the, as they say, meet space, because face-to-face is, I think, the wrong term. I would like to prefer it, but you and I are face-to-face, but via the screen, and so
Yes.
it doesn't work out.
It's quite different. It's quite different than if we were in the same room. You're right. Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. I could keep tugging at that sweater, but you came in. Was there something that you wanted to bring up, that the reason you came in, or?
No, I found it very well, and I found that very good that we came spontaneously into the conversation. I originally had already the idea of writing to you and me maybe having a conversation of that kind, but it was mostly about the topics we are speaking about now.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure you had space if there was something else on your mind.
No regrets, not until now. But I think what might be relevant, what I find is very interesting, is I am, of course, part of a little corner of this internet, but I'm more part of a, except for meme channel, within the German corner. And so for that reason, I would say it is one issue that I find very important, that the German corner builds its own autonomous space with its own rules, with its own identity, and it being distinct and thereby drawing attention to different issues. Of course, we have other knowledge, we have other traditions, other history, other people to which we put our attention, but I found it very worthwhile and important to reach out and look for conversation partners. And also for that reason, I found it important to reach out to you, because there are some people who are more, let's say, they draw their attention to them and thereby they change their surroundings. And there are some people who are more eye-catching. And for that reason, I found it important that different spaces communicate with each other, but they also have to draw the line and to become more detached and different and autonomous. And I think that is important for. So that is an answer to your question. Is there any topic that you would like to speak about? Is there anything that you had on your mind you were asking me? And yes, I have a lot of other things on my mind, but that was something.
Yeah. No, it's interesting the way that this thing has evolved. And it's hard to even kind of identify what it is. Like I use this little corner, but I also recognize the place where people get annoyed with the use of it because it's sort of it's not clearly defined. It's mushy and who decides who's in and who's out. There's not really that case, but there is something interesting about the in-person communities, and I've loved being able to get to know a lot of the German people through doing the festivals and cultivating this in-person space. There's so much beauty to that, and I think that's where the life of this little corner is really going to take shape, where we can kind of cross over from just online world speaking face to face through screens to getting around a table, sharing a meal, and being able to see each other outside of the little boxes we put ourselves in. And yeah, there's something really beautiful to that.
I think so too, and I think it is also very important that you had that kind of festival and thereby had, as you said, a mutual table, a mutual space. But I think the people gathered, and there they were able not only to meet each other, form connections, but also they, after that, dispersed and they got their own ideas of that meeting, and then on their own, they formed their own ideas, and they formed them according to their own conceptions and own surroundings, and they form something that is very much different from the person and the idea that, no, from the thing that someone else said. If I give to you some kind of idea, and then you make something different out of it, without taking into account what I would like you to draw as a conclusion, it might be very worthwhile, or maybe something that I have to take into account because I wasn't noticing it. I think this effort, being disconnected but also connected, being distributed, and very much, what is it called? I hate it. I hate it to speak in a language which isn't my own. Dispersed. It was dispersed. In German, we have, for example, this word zerstreut, which means that you are not really all there, that you are not really focused, and distributed and dispersed knowledge could mean in our German language, for example, that you are not really focusing. And I think distributed cognition has that aspect to it. It seems, in a sense, mad, in a sense, even forgetful, but it helps. And when you have a place where people come back to and then re-actualize what they have hitherto said to each other, I think that updates the situation and the knowledge of the people.
Well, it's like Paul was saying in some video, like people are endless. They're these deep wells that you can't ever get to the bottom of. And so there's something about that ability to come back to a place and meet people again and again and find that way to really commune with each other and understand more deeply what it is to be human and how we're living this life and finding ways to do that. It's so interesting to me. And I just think we do it online all the time, but without it grounded somewhere in reality, I just feel like it's going to fragment us in a way that's not the most beneficial. It's going to have these diminishing returns.
I
And
remember
so that's
that. Yeah, sorry.
So, no, repeat that.
I remember that video, and I'm not going to interrupt you. Please continue.
Oh yeah, I mean that was the end of my rambling, I think.
Perfect. I think it was also connected to his rambling on it being different to work on the map and it being detached from the landscape. You have, of course, some correspondence between things, but when you are always working on the map without being actualized and being put into reality, that is in the physical order of things, with real people, and what is real people if not physical manifestations of it. I really like the word manifestation because it comes from the Latin word for manus, which is hand. And so it's graspable. You can also look at the things, and face-to-face doesn't work out anymore, but graspable. And that is one demarcation. And if it goes on a little bit further, maybe it will be smelled. But I don't know what the next demarcation will be. But yes, I think this connection between one kind of effort in another area, that is of utmost importance, because not all efforts play out and bring out the results that we really want. And in a sense, a great many things of modernity, or of our age, I would rather say, are the allures which draw our attention to things which are not dangerous, but leading to more suffering than would be in our interest or what we would wish for. So it's not something to be enlightened about. In Germany, we speak of Aufklärung, as if something becomes clearer. But even that word doesn't play out anymore. I think when the people return to narratives and stories, it's not because they need more clearance or need more clarity about things. It's the opposite. They need to get the dispositions which help them to attach to other things. And thereby they disregard other things, whereby they become innocent, blinded, but also attached and thereby connected with things which are worthwhile. And it is a very helpful illusion. A helpful illusion, but it has more benefits to be blinded in that sense than it is to not be blinded. And I think there are illusions with pragmatic use, and religion is one of those things. And even the metaphor of being enlightened doesn't work anymore. I think it loses out all its meaning.
I'll have to chew on that. I'm not sure if I comprehend everything you just said.
Maybe I was also just putting out nonsense, but if you have to chew on it, it might work out, and maybe you get something from it.
I'm sure it wasn't nonsense. No, not at all. Here's a question.
Sure.
What do you think of our modern stories and the way they're shaping people?
You mean it in the sense of what is distributed by the media, or what people are telling themselves and others, or is it rather this?
I probably mean the things that become popular.
Okay, to answer your question by talking about my own autobiography, I have the impression that much what has happened within the second half of the 20th century is totally detached from what I really find to be important. And I think a great many people are confused with regards to the problems that have been spoken about. For example, post-structuralism, this talk about Derrida, Foucault. He's a clever one. He's a really interesting fellow, Foucault. But I think what his disciples have done is very confused. And I think it is based on a lack of education and an unawareness of what has hitherto been achieved within other fields and areas. I think much of what we do would be unnecessary if we were reflecting on the origins and the other thinkers. I think a lot of education has been lost and people have been misled. Misled is, I think, the best way to put it. They are not only distracted, but they are misled. And I think we put too much emphasis on the wrong things. And I find it very strange. I have been visiting a few days ago one German city, which is very different from the place where I am living right now. It's a very small city compared to the one I was visiting. And there was, for example, the campus of the university. And there were many advertisements for events and what to go to and what to support, propaganda. And I found it so strange that things of that kind would be supported while the people there being very much unaware of the state they are in. An urban city is very much unable to support what they are advertising. And I find it so strange when you speak, for example, of integration, contra rightism, contra, in Germany, it is the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, that is one of the seemingly right-wing parties. And we have to be united, and to be united is an important value. And then I look at the town and I think, how do you want to be united within a town which has one block, which is really very distinct from all its surroundings? There are hundreds of meters between you and another block and another house or building, and there you have one organization which supports one thing, and then you have one other organization, and they all follow their own purposes and their own agenda, and they are all living next to each other without being with each other. And I find it so strange, this attention to governance, of having a mutual and common goal. I think that is something very strange. I know, and I'm very much aware of it, that our corner is also part of this, in the sense of it wanting to get connected and having meaning, and they get the meaning out of togetherness, of participation. But a great many people have also said, for example, Douglas Murray, that politics is a bad substitute for religion, for example. And this is another form of substituting a community. But the narratives we have nowadays are trying to reach a form of bonding and unity that I find very much illusory. And the efforts that they have are displaced and oftentimes not even effective.
Right. Yeah, it's very odd. I've thought a lot about the political questions, because I mean I've been in a lot of industries and cities where politics is a big thing, particularly in America. And there's definitely a lot of division in the political sphere in America. And I often feel like the way that activists aim to create some togetherness or fix these problems are sort of backwards. It's like we want to fix systemic racism, but we have no idea what's going on with our neighbor.
Mhm.
And it's sort of like maybe by finding ways to ground where we are locally, instead of trying to be the world changer to fix some global problem, there's more good that can come from that, and a better understanding of how to even
Mhm.
try to fix a problem on a larger scale. And
Yeah.
I don't have answers on what makes sense, but yeah, I've thought a lot about that, the narratives that become popular, the narratives that we say, the stories we tell ourselves, and how they play out in our real world, and how much are we deceiving ourselves
Yes.
in in trying to fit the narrative in a small box to make us feel like it's livable. I don't know. I agree with you. I think there is a lot of confusion.
Mhm.
How to fix it, I don't know, but it's definitely discouraging to me.
Yes, I think you're very much right, but at least you can smile a little bit. And so,
Well, if anything, I have hope. Um, you know, whether it's my weakness or not, there's beauty to be seen in the world. There's hope that this is not the end of the story, and I see that I guess I have a trust that there's something bigger than me that has the ultimate hand in fixing these problems, and so there
mm,
I can smile through it. But it's definitely it's definitely hard for me to wrestle with at times.
I think so too. And even if you have no conclusions or solutions, of course, we can also say we have no solutions, but we have a critique which makes all the solutions that have been offered futile because they are all erroneous or wrong. And I very much agree to what you were saying. They oftentimes have it backwards. And I think oftentimes erroneous assumptions come from the confusion of cause and effect. I have a friend who is a psychologist, and he was speaking about magical thinking one time when I met him. And we were talking about a few things. And then he said, it seems to me that a lot of the social justice people, or a lot of the people who are part of a modern leftist politics, I'm sorry, but not only the right wing, but also the left wing is a problem. I think all is a problem. The whole area is a problem. And I think he mentioned to me that they often attach importance to things which have no causal relevance, but they are in error because what I said before, they oftentimes confuse cause and effects. And I think this is also related to this topic, what we were speaking about before, that they oftentimes attribute to language the importance of it being foundational. For example, narratives are foundational, language is foundational, but when we realize that there's a detachment between abstract representation of a word and the possibility to act or not act on the awareness of an abstract representation without uttering a word, and you wanting to utter a sentence, and this sentence is detached from what you are willing to do, you soon realize that there's a similar issue here. I think that people oftentimes reconstruct a system of thought, a system of language, and the use of symbols and something like that, and they say, oh, this is the cause of everything, and this is really the root for everything, and due to this, we have to work at it. And I think this is really an intellectual error, and an intellectual error on both, even on Peterson's side, Jordan Peterson, but also on the side of the leftist politics. They substitute the effect for the cause for the effect. And I think that is really the problem. And it means that a lot of the things that we do is erroneous, which doesn't mean that it is not always helpful. I think Peterson's approach is helpful, although intellectually erroneous. And I think what a great many people of the leftists do is erroneous and not helpful. And so there are demarcations to be drawn, and there are issues where we can talk about what works and doesn't work, what is pragmatic and what is not pragmatic. And yes, I think that is something we should talk about, and that is more or less objective. When we talk about cause and effect and instrumentals and the use of something we use for an objective that we want to reach, we can talk about it. When we say we want to sustain the world population around the globe, I think a return to tribalism is not an option. We need a market society for that. I don't have another alternative, or I don't know of any other kind of society that has been able to sustain not only millions, but billions of people. And I have never seen a tribe population being able to do that. I'm sorry, but empirically, there are not many options. And the problem is really a lot of possibilities fall away according to what we have ever know, according to experience. And there is not much alternative. Not many alternatives.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've been listening to some of like the Barbie conversations, and you watched my Taylor Swift series and my conversation with Byrne on that. Where do you think these sort of where do you think art plays in the conversation and the narratives that we're sharing with each other? Do you think it's helping? Do you think it's hurting?
Both. No, I very much am a big fan of Oscar Wilde, and he had one wonderful dialogue where he said, life imitates art more often than the opposite. And that is, for example, I'll very much talk about this example. Not everyone has seen the mist within London before poets wrote about it, he says. Maybe the mists in London have existed for centuries, but no one has recognized them before any poet wrote about them. And I think narratives and stories, or whatever form of art it may be, is as Oscar Wilde says, useless in the beginning, but that means it is a preparation for future possibilities and future perceptions. So there is, as for example, many socialists have noticed, Herbert Marcuse, Theodor W. Adorno, Wiesengrund, Adorno, and both Germans, they have oftentimes spoken about the utopian possibilities of art, which I think is misleading, because art is only utopian because it enables different kinds of perceptions. It doesn't mean that it inhibits other forms of perceptions and that you can, for example, mold art to your own political purposes. I don't think so. We have many people who instrumentalize art and thereby try to draw attention to, for example, certain exclusive groups and group interests. I think this is completely wrong. I think this is another case of switching cause and effect. And the original reason for art being utopian or seemingly being able to anticipate other modes of being or other modes of a society manifesting itself, objectivation of it, is really to it enabling our different kinds of perception and drawing attention to things which haven't been noticed.
I mean, that's something interesting, because there's something true and
something wrong about what I'm talking about. Yes. I think I will return, maybe after a small pause.
All right. Sorry, for some reason, it all just like shut down. I apologize for the unexpected break. Can you guys still hear me? Those watching? Yes? No? Maybe not. Yes. Oh, yes. Great. Sorry about the unexpected delay. I don't know what happened. I wish I could tell you. I don't know. But yeah, Peter dipped out for a minute. So I'll stay on for a little bit, see if he comes back. The link, if anybody wants to join the conversation, is in the description. I also put it in the chat. I don't think I pinned it. I can try to go back and pin it now in the event that it is not viewable. Sorry, I'm not a very good multitasker. So talking and trying to figure out how to get back to the YouTube screen or the live chat is not my strong suit. Okay. Thank you for all coming and watching. If you have any questions, let me know. I tried to read the comments while I'm going, although it's a little bit distracting for me. Ooh, Peter's back.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Hi, Peter. No, I'm sorry. My computer just like went black, and then I didn't know what to do. But I'm glad you were still there.
No problem. Even the screen went black, so I think that is also the case. No, just kidding. Where were we at? And what was your last train of thought? I didn't.
Oh yes, yes. Hold on. I'm just gonna pin this comment. Okay, there we go. Then I'm back here. No, I was gonna kind of play on the idea that there's no new ideas under the sun. And so this idea that like when you're an artist, you're never really making anything new. You're just re-articulating something that's already been seen. But in some ways, you kind of articulate it as if artists are helping us see something that no one else has ever seen before.
I think that is true. Even abstract art, and that is really interesting because abstract art has no direct representation of any object within the world. For example, within the 18th century, David Hume says, "When I'm angry, I am possessed only by some kind of mood, and there is no reference to any object at all." And I think such a disposition, like anger, is also manifested through the works of artists. I think they prepare a kind of disposition within us, and thereby I call it synesthetically. Synesthetically means the simultaneity of different qualities that are connected or related in some way. And by them being connected, and by connecting qualities that haven't been connected at all, we draw attention to things that we otherwise wouldn't perceive. That was a very abstract concept, but what I'm saying is, before we have symbols that are established, we have to have connections, which are the basis, psychological basis, via individuals, via individual organisms and beings, that they themselves have psychological dispositions, and that a symbol becomes established is only the later consequence of a great many people having a similarity in their own perception. That we speak of something as being a symbol is because of a similarity in behavior, a similarity in perception, and the preparing of those dispositions is what many people do not notice. It is unnoticed because it happens just unconsciously. It just happens via the roundabout way of the brain. And the success and the great achievement of art is that it is useless, purposeless, as Oscar Wilde says. And when some people speak of le art pour le art, my French is terrible, I haven't learned it, but le art pour le art means art for the purpose of art. And that is something like a freedom cry or a battle cry for the artist who says, we do not want to be involved within society. We want to be creative, and creative means creating something and creating it according to conceptions that are not necessarily conservative. I, for example, have a very big, I cannot say distaste. In some ways, he is really an interesting guy, but Peugeot is an artist. And just like every artist, he does something that is unusual for his time, and so he becomes a conservative. But yes, I think for the time of the 19th century, Oscar Wilde was born, let me think, 1855 on the 13th of October. It was unnecessary. No, the 16th of October, sorry. And the 30th of November 1900, he died. And so he didn't get the chance for a Nobel Prize, and he still became popular and famous. But more importantly, he really was one of the people who was at the front of the Le Art pour l'Art movement and said, let's try to make beautiful art. Let's make something that is beautiful and that has no other purpose except for in itself. And this is a way of saying we ignore what happens all around us. We want to do something that is good because we find it good. And that is something that frees itself from the constraints of its time. And sometimes it might be necessary. But we have reached a point where what Peugeot does is very well necessary, because we have been so freed and so borderless that we can do all kinds of stuff that becomes, in that sense, nonsense. It has no reference to any object at all. Like the anger that does not refer to anything at all, so most of the pieces of art do not refer to anything at all. They become abstract. And we also have this political movement which captures the art and tries to make it part of an agenda or program. Both are mistaken, in my opinion. And what also happens, I think Peugeot agrees in that title, I think I have heard him say it also, economical affairs draw in a great many things and commercialize them. and thereby the maybe utopian, maybe anticipatory quality is lost. And by imitating what one person brings into the world, we do not notice that something new has emerged or has happened because it is immediately copied. So you were speaking about the impossibility of creating something new. And I say something new emerges every day and every time, but we do not notice it because everyone likes what we find and thereby they copy it. And so everything that is new becomes, if it is liked, something that is altogether usual.
So what kind of art are you drawn to personally?
The kind of thing that draws my attention. No, I really no. I would say.
I mean, do you have a favorite art form, or?
I think it really depends on my mood. When
Yeah.
I listen, for example, to music, I cannot remember the names. I really cannot remember the name of the artist. I listen to it and I have a very clear memory of the songs. I listen to them on repeat. And that means I listen to them hundreds and dozens of times. And I have a strong memory and attachment to the situation. When I read, for example, a certain book, and when I say, okay, I want to get in the mood for this book, I listen to that particular song. And when I listen to the song, I get the memory of the book. And then
so they're very connected for you. They're like woven together.
Yes, but there is a strong absence of symbolics and language within my own consciousness, which is another reason for the possibility of this great split. And so I think I have an unusual mind, and this disappearance of thought, of thought in the verbal and propositional sense, is really what led me to a great discomfort with what is popular nowadays. And so, yes, my art forms are really dependent on my mood and what effect they have on my emotions. And what I find tasteful and not tasteful.
So what have you thought about some of the conversations about the popular art that's going around? Like you said, you watched some of the conversations with the Barbie movie, you watched my Taylor Swift video. What are you thinking about these conversations of the thing that's catching popular attention?
Maybe this goes back to what I was saying about the detachment of text or language and my own perception. When you speak, for example, about Taylor Swift and the lyrics of a song, I listen to Taylor Swift sometimes as well. But when I listen to her, I don't listen to the text. And most of the times, what I really think about and really get attached to with regards to the song has no connection to the content of the lyrics at all. So he speaks in one passage about this thing, and it has some kind of association for me, which is really unrelated to everything else singing about the song. So that is one.
That's probably true for a lot of people with Taylor Swift, though. If I'm if I really think about it.
Yes, I think that is also quite interesting. Except for the issue that I do not like rap music, I also have noticed that many people, for example, when they listen to German rap music or even German songs, I hated to listen to songs in my own language. And
oh, really?
I too much understand them. And as soon as I understand them, I dislike them. I cannot concentrate on the mood. And it overshadows in that sense. That is what I was mentioning before. Overshadows is the wrong thing. It overlights. The clarity of the words makes me unable to partake in the mood and in the kind of fashion that I would like to participate in the music. As soon as I speak about meaning or something that is attached to words, I dislike it. I really don't want to participate in that at all. And what is really interesting to me is that, I'm going back to your question, a great many people listen to, for example, Taylor Swift, listen to rap music, and they listen to the song, and they listen to the lyrics. And then they speak and talk about, oh, you can't use that word. What word? I haven't noticed it at all. I don't know what you're speaking about. The mood is okay. It's really good. I really like it. And so this is, for me, in my sense, I'm the odd one because in my case, it's the other way around. And the other people, do what I wouldn't do in my own fashion. So it's extraordinary for me. And that music has this also propositional function is really something strange for me. It's really something that I find odd. And yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I've always found the lyrics of songs deeply interesting. And I think lately I've gotten even more interested in them because of this realization that we sing these songs without very often thinking about what they're saying, and
Exactly.
they become these mantras for us in these ways that are rewriting the way that we're seeing the world and we're living out the world. And that's very tricky, especially if we're not really understanding the narratives that are embedded in and what it's encouraging us to live. And that's why I found the whole Taylor Swift thing very interesting. Because there is this sort of movement to see Taylor Swift as an icon for women to, you know, how would you say it? To look up to,
Symbolize.
or to participate in her story. And what I think people aren't fully recognizing is how sad she feels about some of her life and the fragmentation that has found itself in her story. And
Yes.
To me, it's like Taylor Swift's so interesting because she puts so much of herself into her music, and I've always been interested in people. So that's always sort of interesting, of like feeling like you have an understanding of the human experience. But there is something about that where she puts these deeply cutting lyrics and these very sad stories under these like very catchy poppy beats, and you kind of forget that the thing that is being laid out is sort of tragic.
I think what you are speaking about the catchiness, you have said a great many things that I want to add something to, but I'm trying to make it according to line. So what you said first, I'm going to answer first, and I'm going to answer what you were saying last in the later part of my answer. I think you have this catchiness, of course, but when you listen to example for what people have spoken about with regards to fascist countries, Nazi Deutschland, Nazi Germany, and then you have someone like Oswald Spengler, who wrote the Decline of the West, Untergang des Abendlandes, and he spoke in one passage about the uniting aspect of marching music, and that there is a sort of uniting thing that you have otherwise not. And I think what you have in music, forming a unity, forming a community, is really very strong in its effects within the music, and you also have it in narratives, you also have it in other things. And what is common to narratives and music is this synthesizing aspect of putting emphasis and unity to things which you otherwise wouldn't think about. You said, for example, before that I listen to the song, it's so catchy, and then I sing about things which I wouldn't support otherwise, for example. And then you can sing, for example, Die Wacht am Rhein, the guard of the Rhine, that is a river on the former border of Germany. And when you sing about, for example, you have to defend it, and then you have to battle it against the French people. And then you remember, oh my goodness, this song is so catchy, it's so good. And so why do I sing something about fighting the French? I think we were in a peace treaty or something like that. And you have, for example, something akin to that in every kind of hymn. A multitude of songs, and I mean the songs about our own country. They are oftentimes very bloody, especially the French one. They really sing about decapitating the people who are royals, for example. And I don't think that anyone who reads it in the propositionist sense would be very much attached to it. But as soon as they listen, for example, to the song, they sing it loudly and proudly, and they say, oh, we are part of it, and we want to be part of it. And I think this kind of power is the cause. And people putting emphasis and attention to the song and its propositional aspect is really due to this cause. That is it bringing motivation, guiding, and orientation. Those are three functions. And then separately to that is the building of bonds and communities. And so when other people similarly to you sing it, you all participate, and then you become a unity. And that is the political danger of it. And when you have it in Nazi Germany, you might have it in Taylor Swift as well. I'm just kidding. But you have a symbolic instance of someone becoming an idol. And what you were speaking about in your videos is really she becoming an example to look at and to maybe imitate. And she is an example for a generation and for the people who looked up to her and said, I want to be similar like her. I want to be part of it as well. And I find that so interesting because I have posted under your videos, for example, the comment that I have remembered cases of other people attacking her and throwing dirt at her. But later on, they were jubilating and really looking up to her and saying, she's a great person, I love her. And it's so strange how seemingly, it doesn't mean that they are the same people, but seemingly the same people or groups of people become fond of her. And it changes with the times, with the moods and the opinions. And she is an important example about the kinds of effects of the ideas of people. But at the same time, I think you are very right in saying, what are the dispositions? What are the motivations? What is the past of her? And what are the conflicts she has had? Oftentimes romantic, oftentimes things about relationships and heartache, and about the wish to be acknowledged. And oftentimes I think of her as a child that hasn't really grown up, hasn't really internalized how to be stable without the acknowledgement outside of herself. I think she, you have had, for example, one clip of a video of her being with her father and her family, and she really cried, and there she says, I really need this, I really want this. But why did she want this? She was even willing to forgo the acknowledgement of her father for the acknowledgement by others, I would say.
Yeah.
And she has a strong attachment.
Yeah, well, in that documentary where that clip comes from, she talks about how often she feels like the age you get famous in is the age that you get stuck in. And so it took her a really long time to grow up. And so in some ways she would agree with that sentiment of she doesn't know what it's like to be an adult, because in many ways she's never really gotten the chance to. Because even now she's an adult woman. She's older than I am, but she's always lived her life with a security guard in this weird bubble in a world that has no normalcy at all. And so you kind of get stuck in that place where, or at least she tries to hold on to that place where she felt normal, because now her life is just, she got exactly what she wanted, but her life is just so absurdly sized that she has no place to ground those things.
In a sense, she is very similar to the story of Peter Pan, not wanting to grow up, but also she has this awareness, and sometimes she hasn't it. I'm not knowing her enough to really say this, but I have the impression that there is some dissociation. But she's very similar to Michael Jackson in that regard, who also had his problems, but she is interesting because she is the female instance of that. And that is very different.
Yeah. I mean, she definitely has this appeal in the way that Michael Jackson did. And it's hard to know who is bigger. I didn't quite live through the Michael Jackson era when it was like in his heyday. So, it's hard to know, and media's changed so much. But there is this sort of, there's a scale of Taylor Swift in the last 3 years that has been bigger than she ever was before. I still don't quite understand exactly what it is that's causing it. But there's something interesting to that. And it's interesting to watch the power dynamics that shape itself for consumers and her as a creator. And like it's a tricky tightrope to walk, isn't it?
There's one aspect, except for my subjectivity, of course, why I would say that Michael Jackson is the greater of them, not only because of everyone saying it and it being popular opinion, but the great reaction to his death. He was really a marginal figure at the time. He was really neglected and no one was paying attention to him. But as soon as he died, there was an uproar. There was a great extent in which people were reacting. And I think even all of the top 10, maybe the top 20 of the iTunes top charts were Michael Jackson at this time for a few months. And there is a great attachment to particular songs. It is strange and very important when a song becomes an instance of itself, when you have something like the Earth song, Smooth Criminal, or whatever it may be. It is amazing to have a song being remembered and standing on its own so that people talk about it and reference it, even without speaking about the artist and what he otherwise has done. I'm not so sure whether that point has been reached by Taylor Swift, but when people can, speak in that fashion about the song being that momentaneous or monumental, then I think that is another stage of attention and popularity. Not popularity, but it being ingrained within the consciousness of the people.
Right. Well, we'll have to see. She's coming out with a new album here soon. So, oh, Christian, I think you've got to mute the YouTube screen. There you go. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I think she's still a little young to know exactly where the trajectory is. I think at this point Taylor Swift is a little less controversial of a figure
and
than Michael Jackson.
Different, very different, because of course she's a woman, obviously, and she's another type, another way of uprising and upbringing. Madonna has been very much lost and ignored. I don't know who is really.
Yeah, Christian, I think you have the YouTube tab still open, so it's echoing.
It's echoing, exactly.
But welcome.
Sorry about
okay,
that.
I can go on, but please do when you have something to say.
No, I was just going to say, can y'all hear okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just going to say that I think she's in this generation versus Michael was of another generation. And I think it's not necessarily like, it's kind of apples and oranges in a way, but the other piece is that you can see there's actually a maturing of, in some ways, of society, and because people like Michael Jackson, people like Madonna, people like Britney Spears, she was able to kind of get insulated. Maybe there was other pieces of wisdom from some of the just market abuse that seems to have been a pattern in society that she isn't exactly, that she kind of transcended or was built in. There was some, I think that is different in this era.
I find it good and very relevant that you mentioned those names in particular. You spoke not only on Michael, that is obvious, we were talking about him, but you were mentioning also Britney Spears. Yeah. And for example, I remember looking, have you seen Viva or MTV? I don't know what it was in your country, but in Germany we had those television stations which were called MTV and Viva, and they were the stations where music videos were playing. And so they were always comparing Britney Spears to Christina Aguilera. And she has been, I don't want to say forgotten, but marginalized in comparison to, for example, Britney Spears. And they were equally spoken about at their own time. And I remember also Rihanna coming up at the time. I haven't been that often wrong in my lifetime, or my errors were not as big as this one, for example. But I remember coming to the realization when the video of her, SOS, was coming up. I saw her. I thought, what a beautiful woman. What a tragedy that she will not be famous and will be forgotten soon. I was totally wrong about that. And I really thought of her as some person who is maybe a one-hit wonder or something like that. Maybe 2 or 3. But that she would become a star of that size or influence, I didn't really see, and I was totally wrong about that.
Cassidy, I think I watched one of your, I did a little YouTube snooping and seen you had done, you're doing or have done a series on Taylor Swift.
Yeah,
Or-
it's pretty much finished. Although she's got a new album, depending on what happens there, it might I might sneak in again. But no, I did 2 recorded, and then the last one I did sort of like a live stream with it. But yes, my little breakdown of the Taylor Swift phenomenon.
Yeah, and I honestly, I didn't get super deep. I think I watched an episode, but in my life, so I have 2 daughters, 14 and 10. And so you can only imagine that what role she's playing in their life right now. And it's interesting because I'd kind of gotten, her country stuff. I live in the rural South, and so that was kind of a part of the culture there during that time. And even like my father-in-law liked these little country pop songs that were coming out, and from Taylor Swift. And then but when 1989 came out, and that's when I kind of was like, oh, this kind of resonated with me from kind of a indie emo, but then I think it was Ryan Adams did a cover of the whole album.
Summer of
And so
69.
yeah, or 89.
69. Summer of 69.
Oh, but he did
Yeah, he did he covered the 1989 album from Taylor Swift. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, but
yeah, and so that's when she started to transcend like her own her own genre and stereotype into some people that were paying attention to her. And then obviously she like partnered with Bon Iver and some other people that kind of put her into some different spaces. And even for herself, that she didn't, that's a type of authenticity of not just going after like status, but like going down to your meaning.
yes,
that she kind of explored a little bit of that in some. She is interesting in that way.
Burn Powers, for example, said in a recent conversation that his impression of her is that she hasn't really reached down to the roots. Of course, he is speaking with his decades of experience of what he knows, and so there is a lot of knowledge that he has due to the immediate encounter and experience, and she might not have encountered them and thereby hasn't grown with the education that he has. His education is the encounter, and what she does is really, maybe we haven't complimented her enough on the extent with which she has experimented and really gone into different areas. I think many other people have gotten stuck, and as you said, she was originally part of the country movement, and she has really gone beyond it and really gone into different areas and realms, and I think that is something to appreciate, and she's really laudable for that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I've got about 7 minutes of scheduled time, so we probably should find some way to land the plane. Is there anything either of you want to bring up to kind of end the conversation?
Well, I obviously missed whatever the first part of the conversation was about, but like I said, I'd seen your stuff, and I think the Taylor Swift conversation is really interesting in the culture for a lot of different reasons, and I think that she definitely, she doesn't want to be put in a box, and even her ideas, her own contradictions on her own femininity, I think are really, really fascinating. And what keeps it interesting for me as a father, watching my daughters kind of engage with her and the pros and the cons that I see in all of that, it's an interesting conversation. And, so I think that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it will be interesting to see this next phase. Like, she is kind of at a tipping point of whether or not she will continue to transcend and ascend, or kind of land the plane into pursuing, a little simpler existence.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I in the last little section of the Taylor Swift video, I started with this article that I found, and the title was You might not be a Swiftie, but be glad your daughter is. And
Yeah.
I think for me that title was really fascinating because a lot of these questions about the feminine and the cultural narrative of those things and the way Taylor Swift is embodying those were driven by the fact that, you know, I was pregnant with a daughter, and
Mhm.
she's far too young to identify as anything. But you know, it's like, what does it mean if my daughter finds this interesting? And what is Taylor Swift actually encouraging my daughter to be? What is she saying? What is embedded in her music? And I think there's far more to it than meets the eye. And
100%.
so it's fascinating to watch her. And she became famous as I was growing up.
Mhm.
She's only a couple years older than me. So in high school, when her first album came out, and I remember listening to that, even though I wasn't really into country. And then, yeah, I sort of fell away from it. I would hear it here and there because my younger sister, you know, she's a Swiftie. But, you know, like 1989 came around, and that was really interesting. And then, you know, just watching her, sort of her chameleon eras were very interesting to watch as she really threw herself into
Pop.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like not just pop, but like really playing a performance and leveraging her story and narrative to like feed into that. And
With her entertainment, like becoming
yeah,
more of an entertainer. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. She's playing these characters, and you know, having them being fueled by the narratives that were out about her and the things that were being said about her and what she wanted people to see her as. There was something interesting about that. But yeah, I'm interested to see what she does next. It could go a lot of different ways. This new album, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I think this is also related to what she was singing about in Shake It Off, and that is also the situation that she has people around her, surrounding her with critique and disavowal of what she does, and what should you ignore, what should you not care about, and what should you concentrate on. I think she has this side, certain. Okay, he's gone. Uh, she has this certain pride and this will to stand up for herself, and maybe to battle it out. And you also pointed out, for example, that she has this extreme reaction and this very strong change in her image. And I have those pictures of those scenes in front of my imaginary eye, where she had a lot of strong dark makeup, and that is something that she was. Bad Blood, for example. Bad Blood is one of those videos where she had a lot of dark makeup in her face and on her eyes. And I think this is very important, how she engages with other people. And those are the results of her experiences. And again, cause and effect. What the people realize when they become a Swiftie are the reactions and the conclusions which she drew from certain experiences. And it is important to reconstruct in that sense, to mentally trace back what her origins and those encounters with the world were, because those are the origins, those are the waters from which she came and has passed in, and from which she drew the water to drink, and that is the kind of water which we Swifties will also drink.
Mm.
I missed the end of what you were going to say, and I'll just end with this. I think that she's kind of like Michael Jordan as a artist. I think she
She's
makes things
back,
personal.
strong and big.
Okay. She takes things and makes them personal, for better for worse, and it lets her drive her art to ascend. She hasn't seemed to try to settle, like, okay, I've reached a certain status, or I'm going to try to like play the, you know, what are they doing? What are they doing at the Oscars or at the whatever? I can't be myself. I've got to, because so and so's not doing this. She's like, I'm going to be Taylor, and you're going to say my music's simple and plain and not interesting. Well, I'm going to make better music. I'm going to, and I think that there's pros and cons to, obviously talked about her transcendence and what it means now that you get isolated in that space to a degree. But if you want to talk about an independent thinker or a strong independent woman, or, like she hasn't, when the Eras tour is going on and Beyonce goes on tour and I don't even know about it. Like, and you take that back 5 years and Beyonce was, I don't know. I don't think we've seen somebody do what Taylor's doing in music. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, that might be a good place to end, because we pulled that thread. We might be here for another hour. So thank you guys so much for coming and chatting, and thanks for all of you for listening. And I will be back again for another live chat the first Monday of March. So thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Cassidy.
See you.